So, in today's episode of What's Going On at My Damn House, I'm building some terrain, another hill for my table, and I'm fighting with my damn weasel because he refuses to poop in his litter box and instead wants to just poop wherever. So, him and I have been at it for about an hour now. And he is, instead of pooping in the litter box, sleeping in it, even though there is some poop in there because I took some and put in there. I thought, hey, maybe he'd figure this shit out. He's pretty smart. He's got two different weasel enclosures, 4 levels in this cage that he can do whatever. And he likes to poop right there and not in the litter box. And he's laying in there right now, but his eyes are open. He's watching me. Because he tried to back into the corner to take a poop earlier, and I poked him and told him no. And he tried it like 2 or 3 more times, and I kept poking him through the bars and being like, no. So he climbed in the litter box and laid down. Now he's staring at me, trying to stare me down. And he's very smart, even though he's a baby. He's maybe 8 months old at this point, and these things live about 12 or 13, maybe more. So I'm pretty convinced he is just waiting for me to walk out of the room. At which point he's going to poop in that corner again. Because it's got, it's wired down there. It'll fall down onto the next level and I'll be in there. I mean, he's an adorable little bastard, but jeez. Louise, his pooping habits are just out of control, this guy. He just does whatever he wants. So, I'm just tracing a rough general layout of what I got going on with this hill. It's basically just going to be a big square blocky hill. Again, the purpose of which is to block some line of sight, maybe add some interesting tactics to the game. 40K, like every other war game, terrain really makes the game. And a good table setup can make or break a lot of different armies. If you keep showing up at your game store and getting wiped out by alpha striking IG or whatever it is, like that tower or whatever, the next time you go up there, make sure there's a ton of terrain blocking line of sight. And then give that a go. See how it changes your luck. Basically, I'm in a battle of wills with a ferret. Got my handy foam cutter. Cuts foam really good. It just takes 10 years. But that's okay. It was cheap. I could afford a better one, but why? This is about all I do with these things. I guess I could use this to cut brick patterns too. That might be neat. If I want to make another shelf like the one I made. That'd be a lot easier than trying to score brick patterns in with a knife and going back over it with a Sharpie pen, depending on how controllable it would be. But if you see me jump up and run at the cage, it's because he's making a break. He's making his potty break. Now this thing is kind of cool. It's a little flexible, so you gotta watch out for it or you'll snap it. And I know that from personal experience. But what's cool about it is if you kind of give it a, you kind of give it a little bit of a wave motion when you're cutting. You can make some nice ridges. And then once that's painted and then dry brushed up to a tan or a gray or whatever suits your table, it looks really good. He's still looking at me. He's still looking. See, the thing with these little animals is they're very smart. I'm not saying rocket science smart. Definitely not as smart as my Pomeranian. That guy is smarter than most people I know. But they're very smart and they're very clever. Their reputation for being sneaky is well deserved. And what he's hoping to do is outlast me because they're also very stubborn. And he wants to poop in the corner he wants to poop in, and he doesn't want to poop in the litter box. So again, a battle of wills between me and the squeezle. And joke's on him because I ain't got anything else to do today, really. So, and I'm amped up on Mountain Dew, so. So he's gonna take a poop in that litter box. It's the last thing. If I have to pick him up and squeeze it out of him like a tube of toothpaste, he is gonna poop in that litter box. Not really. That'd be animal cruelty, and I love him. He's a good little boy. I like to let him out on the back porch. He runs around and plays and dances. And him and my Pomeranian get along really good, so. So pretty much I'm making some big hills. These things are multi-use, not just for 40K, but I'll be using them for Kings of War, Chain of Command, Bolt Action, maybe even Dungeons and Dragons. You know, I mean, it's not necessary. A lot of people just play on battle maps or whatever. But there's nothing preventing you if you have a couple of cool pieces of terrain laying about the house from playing out a wilderness encounter just on the tabletop. I mean, when you really get down to it, as much as a lot of people disagree currently because of a lot of modern sensibilities with you know, Dungeons and Dragons and the story game people and everything like that. But ultimately, Dungeons and Dragons is a skirmish game wherein the players attempt to use their characters' abilities and their own intelligence to overcome challenges set forward by the dungeon master or referee or whatever. That is ultimately what D&D is, and a lot of people try to make it out to be some kind of amateur theater hour or something like that. And you know, while I will say I don't think there's really a wrong way to play D&D, as long as you and all the people at your table are having fun, then, you know, by all means, you do you. But the problem right now, especially if you hang out on Twitter, is a lot of your story gamers, the way they post, they seem to act like, you know, their way is the true way, like it's a religion or something. And it's kind of weird how it leans politically that way too, you know. Your old school gamers, not all of them, but a lot of them, tend to be a lot more conservative and traditional, not just with the game, but life in general. And in my experience, and a lot of the new players tend to be, you know, very progressive and concerned with, you know, more modern issues. Like, I play with a broad mix of players, and the people like me are mostly concerned with having a good time and paying our rent on Friday, and real life stuff like that. Whereas a lot of the younger people I associate and newer gamers, but it's mostly younger people, um, they tend to be obsessed with a lot of stuff that just frankly does not concern me. Whether that makes me a bad person or not, I don't know. But these are the kind of people that don't like that orcs are evil because they're so ideologically stuck in their overemphasizing of race and identity that they can't, it's like they can't think any other way. And it's not their fault, honestly. Honestly, it's not their fault. They're kids. And a kid is going to do what you teach him to do most of the time. So if you're a parent and your kids come home and they start dribbling on all this, I don't know, like critical theory and all that sort of stuff, don't be mad at your kid. It's not his fault. You need to call the school administrator or somebody and ask them what in the hell they're doing, because these theories that they're promoting now in school, and they're not even theories, they're just bad science. It's not even real science. It's bad science. But they're promoting it like it's the gospel truth or something like that. And children, I think, most children, I'm sure there are some sociopaths out there, some psychopaths out there, but, children want to be the good guys. I mean, that's, again, going back to D&D, that's the whole point of D&D. When I was a little kid, being able to play the hero, it affected me for my entire life. The first time I picked up that, when my mom bought me that Moldvay box set, the basic one. I was lucky. My mom never gave in to the satanic panic or any of that crap. So even though we're very religious and still are, my mother was educated and well read, and she opened my world up to a lot of things, a lot of my peers at that time, who were still awesome people and I loved to death, but their parents never would have done. Like, growing up on a ranch and everything, right? Most of my friends that I talked to in school, they grew up the same way I did. They lived on the ranch, and so they worked out in the fields, and same as I did. And then for hobbies, they went fishing or hunting. We did a lot of camping, very active in the Boy Scouts. And it was a great life, We were all dirt poor, but it was a great life. My mother, on the other hand, was a reader. And her father encouraged it. So when she had her own children, and she had, my brother and sister and I, she encouraged it. So when I was in, I think, the second or third grade, she bought me a copy of The Hobbit, excuse me. I don't know what that was. It's kind of like a hiccup, but not. And I read that, and I was just amazed. And And then one of the other kids on the bus was, a little older than me, but not much, and he got into D&D. I don't know how, but he showed me his stuff. Our bus ride was like an hour to school. Yeah, I see you over there. See him moving around a little bit. You can see him moving around a little bit. He's still watching us. He's listening. So of course, when my birthday rolled around, I went to my mom. See, my my mom was real cool about it. There were members of my family and my stepfather at that time who, they were totally not cool with it, but my mom was really cool with it as long as I, did my chores and did everything I was supposed to do. And she didn't let me like live in the house like in a cave all day. I mean, she bought me the D&D game and she had my back about hanging out with friends and playing the game. But I wasn't one of these guys and I've seen these guys nowadays, and I'm trying not to make fun or anything, but these dudes that do what I'm doing now, but then again, I'm getting on closer to 50 than 40, and I'm retired and injured. But I'm talking about these guys when I was in my late teens and video games had started coming out, Atari, and then later NES, and then you had your Commodore and your Tandy. There was a kid I hung out with all the time. I wouldn't call him a friend because he was an asshole, but he was one of these kids that had a lot of money, kind of like R. Cartman. His parents didn't have a lot of money. His parents were awesome people. They worked their asses off, but they spoiled the shit out of this little prick, and he was kind of friends with my brother, and I kind of tolerated his ass hanging out, even though he didn't do anything that I respected, and that was just kind of the way he was. All right, so I've carved a couple of cracks and some rough features in there just to give it a little bit more character. So again, I try not to dox anybody, but this guy was just an ass, and his parents were hardworking and never home because they worked all the damn time, and they did not have easy jobs, but they spoiled him like crazy style. And so sometimes we'd go over to his house and hang out, because it was within walking distance at that time of us, and my brother really liked him because I think they were smoking weed or whatever together. But getting on with the story, so he had all of the computer, like he had a Commodore 64, he had NES. As soon as the Super Nintendo came out, he got that. And he didn't do anything. He sat at his house, smoked weed, and played his video games. Whereas had I tried to be that way with D&D, my mother would have had words with me about it. She would have been like, "Look, I understand you like playing D&D with your friends, and it's awesome, but you need to go out and do something." Yeah. So, because of my mother being that way, I grew up very fit. She made sure even though we were very poor, she made sure I always had enough money to be in the Boy Scouts and to study martial arts. I studied Kempo Karate, or Parker Karate, they call it. There was one of the guys had a movie about it or something a while back, but anyway, she just made sure I stayed physically active while also being a gamer. And that didn't change until I got much older, started being able to make bad decisions for myself. And even then, though, I had some really good friends that I hung out with when I went through my MMO phases. That these cats would play MMOs for 16 plus hours a day, and I thought I was pretty hardcore. But some of these guys, you'd go over to their houses and they'd have their big comfy chair set up in front of the computer, and that's just what they would do. And I'm talking about kids that are like 19, 20. They were younger than I was. I met them at the game shop or something like that. There's always a couple of the younger kids hanging out with my group of friends. The young bloods, whatever you want to call them. And I'd always be like, damn, man, you're 19. You don't have a driver's license. You have no intention of joining the military service. You're living with your grandma. Or 10 roommates. Okay, whatever, Like I said, nice guys, not their fault. It's just the way they were. And I wasn't raised great. Like, for one thing, my wife is constantly, well, not constantly. My wife brings up the fact that I am terrible at housekeeping. And she's basically training me. And part of that is my mother was very peculiar with how she kept house. And I guess she got it from her mother. Or maybe it's a hillbilly thing, but when we were little kids, instead of forcing us to do chores, she was much more about letting us play and run around and have fun. And so, I mean, I don't want anyone to think this is in any way a negative evaluation of my mother's parenting style, because it's not. She was awesome. But we maybe could have learned more discipline. And, it is what it is. It might have just been that hillbilly lifestyle, Not really worrying about too much. Because you never know. You never know. You just let God handle it. And, right. So 20 minutes in, and he's not making a move for it. I'm thinking he thinks he can wait me out. But it's not going to happen, buddy. You may as well poop in that litter box, or you're going to live in it. If there's any negative thing about using one of these cutters, at least the one I have, is that it can leave threads, but they usually just rub them off. Just rub your hand across them a couple of good times and they'll peel right off. So I am just giving a slight bevel to this hill, not required at all, but I think it looks better. Especially if you're going to flock it with grass, which I am. I have some static grass, similar to the type you would use on a model train set or anything that I got at the Hobby Lobby. And all of my terrain pieces are going to be flocked basically with that same grass. So I'm just gonna. That looks pretty good, I've got this little area here. I can put some rocks in it or whatever. And it'll just make it look a little interesting. And now I'm going to try something on this piece. Because if this works, man, could it make my life easy. And look at that. Yeah, but that's the easy part. The long lines are the easy part. You have to move it quick, otherwise it cuts in a little bit too deep. So let's see. Of course, if I were doing this, I might actually, like if I build another miniatures case, which I'm planning on eventually doing, I might actually have drawn this out so that we can be a little bit more. All right, so that happened that quick. Geez, that's pretty good. Now let's see how I do at cutting in the other blocks. That's going to be the difficult part. Oh my God. This is so easy. I probably could crank out one of those miniature cases in a couple hours as opposed to the days I spent hand carving every freaking brick. This is right. I've kind of poked a hole in there a little bit, but it is a dungeon, so it's okay if it's not perfect. So if I could use this thing to make a ultimate dungeon terrain like Dungeon Professor makes. So right there, I just carved in that. I mean, you're watching, so you see how quick it goes. You know, and if I wanted, I could start making the lines a little bit more wavy or, like I said, not perfect. You want it to look a little bit rough. Which means there'll be texturing done with this also. All right. All right, look at that. And that's cut in there pretty good, which means when it comes time to painting it, it dry brush up beautifully. Let me lay that down and make sure it's not on anything. And then, of course, there's your trick right there, a little ball of tinfoil or aluminium foil or whatever. Of course, I'm rattling the table around. It's like earthquake. But let's go back this way. Now, I doubt I'll actually use this piece for anything. I don't think I need it. So just a test piece, test a theory. See, now if you look at it, you can see that it's much more. Yeah, let me get it where the light. You see all that texture on there, right? And then you paint it black with, as I said, that was weird. My screen froze up. But you paint it black with a mix of black paint and glue. I generally do like 1/3 paint, 2/3 glue. Let it cure. And then you can start dry brushing it up to whatever you want. And it will look really good, actually. It'll look like stone. This is not perfect, but you can pick this foam up cheap at, you know, any like Home Depot or Lowe's maybe. This stuff is pretty inexpensive, and it's great for hobbying. And my hot wire cutter, I think I paid $12 for that thing. It's just a cheap little, you know, you plug it into the wall, it's got an on-off switch. And it came with a holder, which was absolute trash and never worked, and two wires, one of which I already broke. So, but with just that, you know, if you were to get a 2 foot by 2 foot sheet of this stuff, sometimes it comes in 2 by 2 sheets, 1 inch thick, and you have a pretty, you know, steady hand, practice with it a little bit. I mean, how many dungeon walls could you build? Or how many UDTs? I mean, this thing was carved with a knife. Let's see if I can get where the light will reflect off it. I carved that joker with a knife. I roughed it up with aluminum foil, black paint, and then dry brushed up. I intend to eventually, when I stop being lazy and distracted and doing every other thing, to do this side like grass. And then that way I could have this on the table, drop a couple trees, you know, put the adventurer somewhere, the monster somewhere, and just battle it out for any role-playing game. Any role-playing. Even though right now my role-playing game of choice is Old School Essentials. And I did back the Old School Advanced Edition Kickstarter at the Dungeon Deity level. Super exciting. I got the email the other day asking me for my shirt size. So I'm going to have a badass Necrotic Gnomes Old School Essentials shirt. That'll be... Anyway, I'm going to end the recording here, and so I can put something on my Facebook page today.